guys, welcome back to another online experience with Hope City, Arkansas. We are so glad that you're here with us today. I'm Ashley.
And I'm not Adam. I'm actually Scotty.
This is
Look a
Scotty.
little different.
And we're the Stripe Twins today. We totally did not plan that. Stripes are in. It's the thing.
It's the new fall line. If
It
you
is.
don't agree with me, you're wrong. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us at another wonderful online experience here with Hope City. A quick way you can engage with us is you can like that video down below. You can share it with your friends on Facebook or any social media platform. And you can actually comment down below. So like maybe, for example, you can comment on like it's about to be fall weather coming up, maybe some like pumpkin spice lattes, whatever you may enjoy about fall. What's your favorite thing about fall? We'll wait together for you to comment on that right now, and then I'll be watching, so you better actually. Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Did you see that one down there?
I did. That was great.
Really, really
I love
good.
It.
I'm impressed.
So one way you guys can kind of follow along with what we're doing at Hope City is you can check us out at hope4nwa.city/connect. And that would just be a great place for you to go, see about who we are, and you can also kind of check out our social media there as well and see what's coming up.
Absolutely. And speaking of what's coming up, we have a few events that we actually have coming up. So on October the 3rd, coming up here in a couple weeks, we're actually having a gathering here at the after school program here. We're not there now, spoiler alert. But at the after school program in Springdale, just right off of I-49 in Springdale. We're going to get together, we're going to laugh, we're gonna cry, we're gonna eat meat and eat cheese. It's gonna be a wonderful experience had by all. So
Yes,
if for nothing else, come for the snacks. The snacks are always
Absolutely.
fantastic.
There's donuts, and you don't have to wear stripes, but you can.
It's a
And if
requirement.
you're
We're just making that
scared,
mandate.
You're not sure about going into a new environment. We just want to remind you, we all are kind of a mess, and we don't have all of our stuff together. We all have questions, and yeah, life can be crazy. But when we come together, it's just a really great place to be open and real with all of that.
Absolutely. And that's not the only thing that we're doing in October. We're actually getting together a little bit later in the month for kind of a party, kind of an event. And we'll have more details on that coming out shortly. So if you follow us on social media, on either Instagram or Facebook, or wherever you get your social media games, just go on there and then connect with us, and we'll have all that information posted out as soon as we have it.
Yes, we're super excited again that you're here with us today. Adam has a great talk for us. You might see Scotty a little bit as well.
Come on, don't spoil it for him.
Oh, and there's also going to be some great songs. If you want to just listen or sing in your living room, you're more than welcome to do that. So again, we're so glad you're here. Welcome to Hope City.
Neighbors, our blood is one. Children of generations, of every nation, of kingdom come.
So don't let your heart be troubled. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth. God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from.
as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus.
Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Swing wide, all you heavens, let the praise go up as the walls come down. All creation, everything with breath, repeat the sound. All His children, clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. His name is Jesus. Jesus, our redemption, our salvation is in His blood. Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, His kingdom come.
Well, hey everyone, once again, welcome for the first time or welcome back to Hope City, Arkansas for our September online experience. If we've not met before, I'm Adam, I'm the lead pastor here. This month we're kicking off a brand new 3-part series called This Is Us, where we'll be exploring the real lives of the real people who make up Hope City. And we're going to take a look at what we value most as a community as we work towards launching every weekend gatherings. And yes, before you ask, this series is absolutely inspired by the TV show. If you haven't seen any of the show This Is Us yet, you must be like me and you're living under a rock, because I just picked up this show and started watching it a few months ago. I know, where have I been this whole time? But what makes this show so captivating for me and for so many other people is how real and relatable it is. This Is Us, it tells the story of what it means to be a human. And it portrays the characters as real people living real lives, and it tells real stories that normal, everyday people like you and me that we can just relate to. It feels like real life, and sometimes we can even find our real lives in the lives of the characters as they're going through what they are. Now, I don't want to ruin any of the plot line for you if you haven't seen it, but the episodes, they literally take you on this emotional roller coaster ride that'll have you laughing at times and angry and ready to punch a hole in the wall, and then you're crying by the end. But what this series does so well is it tells the stories of real human struggle. It tells the stories of pain, but in the middle of that, sometimes there's joy and purpose in the middle of a jacked up world where things don't always work right. Sometimes by the end, just like in life, the story finds a redemptive purpose in pain. But other times it just acknowledges that we do live in a messed up world, and it just lets us sit there in the pain and in the heartache. So all of that to say, if you don't like to cry, then this show is not for you. Don't watch it, okay? But if you're looking for real people with real lives and stories that match up to the life that so many of us live, then this might just be your favorite new TV show, and here's why. Because it's real. And that's what our series here at Hope City, This Is Us, is all about. It's looking at the real lives of real people who make up Hope City. It's looking at what we value most as a community. And even more importantly, it's looking at what Jesus envisioned when He first told us about this community called the church. See, when we think of church, that's where the tension comes in for so many of us, right? Because when we think of church, we think of anything but real. I think for many of us, our experience has taught us that we have to fake it in church, or we have to have it all together in order to be part of a church. Or when we think of church, we think of people who follow a bunch of rules or tell us the rules that we should be following, and we're not even sure if we believe the rules or not, right? Or we think of a standard that honestly no one can live up to. Or we think of a building or a time and a place, somewhere that we have to go or something that we have to do. But what if? What if something real is exactly what Jesus had in mind when He envisioned the church? What if church was a community where you ran to when you got the diagnosis? Or what if it's a community who helped carry you along when he left or she walked out? What if you could have real conversations about your past or your present and you didn't have to hide? What if you could find others who are going through the same things with mental health or infertility or miscarriages or finances? What if there's a place for someone like you who's been hurt along the way, or maybe you've done stuff to hurt other people and you're not sure that the church is a place for you anymore? What if the church wasn't the place that you left when you aren't sure what you believe, but it's the community that you go to, that you run to work through what you believe, and you can do it honestly and transparently? Well, that type of community, that type of place, that type of space is exactly what Jesus had in mind when he envisioned the church. So in Matthew 16, verses 13 through 19, Jesus introduces this idea of the church for the first time. This is about 3/4 of the way through Jesus' ministry. He takes his disciples to a town in northern Israel called Caesarea Philippi. And so a quick little history lesson here. In Old Testament times, Caesarea Philippi had been the center of worshiping a false god called Baal. And then the Greeks conquered Israel, and worship became oriented around Greek fertility gods. And by the time Jesus comes on the scene, the Romans have conquered Israel, and the town of Caesarea Philippi is centered around worshiping the Greek fertility god Pan. And worship of the fertility gods is exactly what you think. The Marvin Gaye music comes on and ba chicka wah wah, like here we go. So why in the world would Jesus take his disciples to a place like that? I mean, doesn't a good religious person like Jesus avoid places like that? Don't the people who are religious people with Jesus avoid towns like Caesarea Philippi? Well, I believe that Caesarea Philippi, it actually forms the backdrop Jesus wanted to provide for the conversation he's going to have next with his disciples. And Jesus is going to give some definition to what "this is us" means when it comes to the church. Matthew chapter 16, starting in verse 13, it says that when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" Jesus asked them. "Who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God." And Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, good for you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." So who is Jesus? I mean, even in his own day, lots of people had thoughts on that. Some thought he was just some old prophet, or others would say he's a good man or he's a good teacher. But then Jesus doubles down on this question to his disciples, and he said, "But what about you? Who do you say that I am?" And then Peter, who was a blue-collar fisherman, Peter who got it wrong as often as he got it right. In fact, right after this, a couple verses later, Peter's going to get it so wrong that Jesus is going to call him Satan. But Peter speaks up and he gets it right this time. He says, "You're our Savior. You're the Son of the living God." To which Jesus responds, "Hey, Peter, good for you. But we all know that you didn't come up with that on your own. Only God could have revealed that to you." And in doing so, Jesus is showing us something really important when it comes to faith in him. No one comes to belief in who Jesus is apart from the work of God in their lives. See, all this time, these men had spent time with Jesus, and they'd seen him heal the sick and restore sight to the blind. They'd seen him turn water into wine and walk on water. They'd seen him bring a widow's dead son back to life. They literally seen resurrection take place, and all of that wasn't enough. And these men, they'd done a lot of good things as well. I mean, think about it. These are people like Peter who had given up their jobs and their livelihood in order to follow Jesus. They'd made sacrifices and they'd done a lot of good works. And Jesus says, none of that is what's going to reveal who I really am to you. That only comes by the work of God. It doesn't come because you're smart enough or you've read enough of the Bible or you've followed enough of the rules or you've done enough good in your life. See, it's only by experiencing Jesus and his power working in our lives that we come to see him for who he truly is. And ultimately, we come to see ourselves for who he created us to be. But Jesus isn't done here yet, because next he's going to show us the type of environment or the type of community where this truth is best discovered, where it's best realized and lived out. Because without skipping a beat, Jesus continues on. In verse 18, he says, "And I tell you, Peter, I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." And that last part about keys and binding and loosing, all that means is just authority. It's a king giving authority to his citizens. It's Jesus entrusting us to do something. So what is that something? See, immediately following the most important question of all time, Jesus reveals the community or the environment where the truth of who he is best discovered, realized, and lived out. And that's the church. It's the church. This is the first time ever that the word church shows up in the Bible, and it's literally Jesus laying out his plan for how the world would come to experience him. See, Jesus promises us that God does the hard work of revealing who he is. Then he shows us that he, Jesus, he builds the church on the rock or the foundation of who he is. So when Jesus talked about the church in this context, the word church, it didn't mean a building or a time or a place where we go. It literally translated from the original Greek, it meant gathering or community. It meant a movement of people. And so what Jesus is saying is that he's entrusted his followers then in us today with this community or this movement of people that are built on the good news of who he is, that he's the Messiah. In ancient Israel, that would have meant that he's the one that's coming to set everything right, that he's the Son of God. And we don't come to this conclusion on the basis of anything we've done, but on the basis of what God has revealed to us. And then he tells us that this community, this movement called the church, that it will exist right up against the gates of hell. Verse 18, again, it says this, Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades won't overcome it. See, in Caesarea Philippi, it was literally believed that there was an entrance into the Greek underworld of Hades. A spring flowed out from underneath a rock, and it was believed that this was the entrance to the Greek underworld where the fertility gods would essentially hibernate in the winter, and then they would come out in the spring. And so they believed that their city was sitting on the gates of hell. If you'd ask anybody who was with Jesus that day, hey, where are the gates of hell? They would point them out and they go, right over there. You can go see them. And since these were fertility gods, in order to get them to come back out every spring, they'd throw on the Marvin Gaye music, and you all know what would happen next. It literally took them doing it in order for their gods to show back up in their lives. In other words, their religion was built on what they did. They had to earn it. Beyond that, though, there was this hillside in town where they had all these altars and pedestals carved out for different false gods for people to worship. So you can imagine how shocked the disciples must have been that day when Jesus brought them to Caesarea Philippi. It was the equivalent of a modern day red light district. It was a place where no good religious person would show up. And all of that was where Jesus asked his disciples a question: who do you say that I am? And it was in this space that Jesus announced the movement of his followers today called the church. See, in doing so, Jesus was giving us a couple important truths about the church. The first one's this: Jesus builds the church and the gates of hell won't stop it. And if you need proof of this and that Jesus is true to his promises, I mean, think about it. We sit here in Northwest Arkansas today having this conversation some 2,000 plus years later after this day in Caesarea Philippi, 2,000 years that have been filled with wars and famines and pandemics and attempts to eliminate Christianity by force, all because Jesus is true to his word. That not even the gates of hell can stop this community or this movement. And the second thing is this: the church exists not just for those who are already following Jesus, but for people who don't know what they believe yet. See, I think that's why it was important for Jesus to go to a place like Caesarea Philippi to announce this movement. A place filled with people searching for which God is true, and they're trying to do enough to earn the favor of their gods. They're trying to be good enough. See, that's why Jesus says the church is going to go all the way up against the gates of hell to the hardest, the darkest places, because there's people searching for truth. There are people that he wants to do work in their lives to reveal the truth of who he is. And again, it's not on the basis of what they've done to earn it, but it's on the basis of his love and his grace for them. In other parts of Scripture, Jesus refers to the church as a hospital for the sick. And he says his message is to seek and save the lost. His mission is to seek and save the lost. He was accused the most of being a drunkard, a glutton, and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Why? Because he was modeling the type of people who are going to come into this community called the church. And he's showing us how to interact with people in everyday life. So you remember what we said earlier about that last verse about keys and binding and loosing? That's language of a king entrusting something to the citizens of his kingdom. See, Jesus is literally entrusting this movement of the church to his disciples of that day, and then ultimately through them to you and I today. And so we could say it this way: God does the work of revealing who Jesus is, and then Jesus builds the church. And we today are entrusted with creating the environment where people who don't know what they believe yet come to experience Jesus for who he really is. Around Hope City, we say it this way: We say that we create intentional environments. We create intentional environments that are attractive to people outside the church, meaning people who are still working through what they believe about life or faith or Jesus or themselves and everything in between. They feel at home and like they have a place in our community. It's attractive to those who don't know what they believe yet or who are working through what they believe. And I know what some of you may be thinking, yeah, Adam, all of that sounds great, but is it really true? Like, is the church really a place for someone like me? Or for my friends, because my experience tells me the opposite. Well, I want you to meet my friend Scotty, because when we say this is us around Hope City, this is us includes people like Scotty.
Well, I think it's one of those situations. I feel like most people could say this answer, but whenever I get the question, "This is me," I always just land on the word complicated. I grew up, it was me and my mom and my sister mostly. Yeah. I was a single mom, and I really struggled early on, childhood-wise, with the lack of a male figure in my life. You know, I'd be playing baseball, I'd be playing, basketball, I'd be playing all these different sports that I really enjoyed as a kid, but I would always, I was a smart enough kid to understand what was going on around me, but not smart enough to understand what was happening and how and why it was happening. So I found myself asking and questioning why I didn't have this father in my life. I feel like that is something that is kind of carried on in my life, whether it be frustration for a multitude of different things. But I found myself at a young age being presented with the idea of being frustrated with the church. It wasn't your traditional schoolhouse bully. It wasn't the person that was just gonna, I'm gonna beat you up and take your lunch money. I mean, it was the kids who had the most vibrant Sunday life. It were the kids whose dad were high ups in the coolest churches and were at these ranches and they did these cool camps, and they were just they were the ones that were rough to me. They were the ones that said the meanest things and were the most passive aggressive and were the most, whether it be through whether it be through the process of me not being important enough to speak with them, or whatever I was saying wasn't worth their time or was worth some sort of jest or ridicule. I mean, those are the experiences I had growing up. And I mean, I grew up in the church. I mean, I had gone to a multitude of different types. I went to a Baptist church growing up. I went to a Methodist church. I ended up landing at a Presbyterian church for a long time. And I never understood that in all of the teachings that I was presented as a kid, through everything that was there, why was it that the people who were the most outwardly Christian were the ones who were the most inwardly hateful, to me at least? And that was something that it was very difficult, and I carried that. I carried that through going to a Christian, Baptist university, and still facing the same issues, still seeing that one situation in which some specific person did this horrible, terrible thing to me. She ended up leading the chapel the next week, and is there singing all these praises and leading prayer and leading worship, and it's like, I know exactly what you did. I always struggled with the idea that because maybe I did a certain thing or maybe I was a certain way, I wasn't pure enough for the church. I was facing a holier than thou situation in which, because maybe in college, maybe because I like to drink, or maybe because I, said a few curse words, that was worthy enough of not only this, not only act of ridicule, but just this certain look. You can only describe it, at least for me, as a look that you just know that there's some sort of judgmental process going on. Sure. And that was hard. That was difficult. And even then, to this day, I still feel that from people who I love and hold very dear to my heart. I still feel those emotions from time to time, and it almost always comes not from an amount of experience, but it comes from this desire to live in this very pure, very sterile, very arms wide out approach to Christianity. That's I'm I'm better than that. I'm going to live a more pure life than that. And in that way, it's not worth my time, or that lifestyle, not even against me, but saying like, oh, that girl used to do something like that in the past. Now she's better. Yeah. What does that mean for me if I did the same thing that she did in the past? Am I not good enough for you? It's so contrary to everything you can read in teachings and everything. And that's not to say that I agree with everything the Bible says. I'm not saying that like I can go down the list of everything in every single book and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Yeah. It's more like, of the teachings I remember reading, it's like, why in the world are we latching on to this idea and this mentality? Yeah, we want to be better, we want to be good people, but you can be a good person and still do sinful things. We can't say that one person commits sin and they are immediately done. You know, who's to say that my sin is any worse than your sin? I can't say that I'm reformed or I'm born again or anything like that. Like I still struggle, and I still have moments where I have to take a full step back and be like, you know, I can't deal with this right now. I have many friends in my life who, from all different walks of, all different points in their walk, and it's like sometimes where they are and how passionate they are about where they are at and how they feel everybody else should be at. I mean, that just is just too much for me, and it just kind of almost pushes me back further and further in my pursuit. You know, Jesus is something and somebody that is like, in the good times, it's great. You know, it's easy, it's simple, almost to just be like, okay, this is happening and this is amazing and look at all these great things. But when it's troubling, or when it's, you know, hard, or when somebody uses that mindset or that idea or that person to then tear you down, it's sometimes so difficult to want to pursue that thing. I never once thought that I would be somebody who'd go to church every week or would be a member of anything. I had a one professor in college who detailed like, and it was very good to me, and almost kind of like that early role model of like what a good Christian could be and what like a good Christian mentor could be to me. Yeah. And I remember thinking all throughout that time, whenever he's talking, it's like, that's really cool, but you know, I'm never gonna be there. Yeah. And it was through meeting you and recognizing that Jesus wasn't the first conversation. It was maybe the 8th conversation after it already had come up in some other situation. It wasn't this active like, hey, let's get this guy to church, let's get these numbers up. It was hey, this is genuinely what the answer to your frustration is. I was at that point really struggling with a certain situation in which I felt like God was being weaponized and God was being used to truly sap somebody of their resources, both mentally, emotionally, and physically, and, you know, financially. And I remember being so frustrated, and almost as if, you know, like the answer to an unsaid prayer, it was, you know, this guy who's like, hey, you know, here is an opportunity to see what God can really be. And that's not to say that, again, like, I'm not fixed. I'm not any better than I was. I'm better. I'm less frustrated. I'm less hateful. But I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm any better of a person now than I was back then, per se. It's just that it came up so naturally, and it was just an opportunity to be a part of something that I felt like was truly genuine, and that's something that I had never really seen in the Christian church before. This genuine nature, what we can do to advance and like tell more people. And I think in many ways we fail to listen. You know, we and that's something that I found in Hope City. You know, it's not the largest congregation, it's not the most devout congregation, but it's people who are people. Yeah. And it's people who you can talk about anything with. You can talk about, you know, sports, or you can talk about, you know, talked about liquor many times, and I've talked about, you know, stories of mine that many in the church would consider unsavory. And I've told to these people, and it's fine. It's okay. You know, I don't have to go in and pretend that I'm something I'm not. And worry that if I show too much of who I am or too much of a certain side of me, that I'm going to be put back, or I'm going to be the conversation of some sort of reform speech, like, hey, we need to fix this person. You know, I don't have to be that. I can be every bit of the sinful person that I am and work towards being less sinful, but do it in a way that's truly honest to who I am and what I am. And that's so valuable to me. And that's something that admittedly I have not found in many opportunities and many churches that I've been a part of. It's almost like it's good for about 2 or 3 weeks, but then it goes away. And now I've been going to Hope City pretty regularly since March. So that would be over half a year, and that's about half a year longer than I thought it would last. I've latched onto the idea that Hope City is not where it's not where people are believers. Hope City is where believers are people. They are both the good, the bad, and the ugly of humanity, and that is something that is so refreshing in the Christian church. It's so nice to be able to go in and see that you're not the only person who does the things that you do, and you're not going to walk in one way and walk out. It's something that is just not honest to who you are, and something that is a face or a version of you that is sterile and pure and whitewashed. It's not. We're not interested in that. You know, it's everybody's different and everybody's at different points, but and it's not to say everybody's like me and everybody's in the same point or does the same things that I do, but I've never once been asked to be anything other than who I am and what I am, and I think that's incredible. I think the easiest thing and the easiest mistake to make, and I'm not some sort of multitude of wisdom or anything like that. I'm just a normal 24-year-old guy who's trying to figure out the answers. But at least in my opinion, I think the easiest mistake to make is just to jump in too much head first. Okay. And taking things one step at a time and not losing your humanity. One of the questions I've asked myself recently whenever I've thought about faith is, if we're truly to pursue godliness in everything that we do, why was it that God made us human? If we're supposed to be perfect and we have to, if we're not perfect, then we're going, we're going to hell. Then why the heck were we put in this situation to fail? And I don't think we are. I think we have to pursue humanity in a way that's genuine and truthful. And sometimes it's ugly, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you make mistakes, and sometimes you do something that honestly can really haunt you. But I think those are all experiences that are worth having in one way or the other. And God fixed me. The idea of being a born again Christian or the idea of being a reformed sinner. I still drink as much, I still curse as much, and I still smoke the occasional cigar as much as I did 2 years ago. I just go to church now regularly, and I talk to people who in a community that I feel like is very positive. But I'm still me, and that's not anything I didn't want to be. And there are some days where I can go in and I can say, man, really feeling this right now. I'm really engaged with this, and I can read the Bible, and I'm like, I can recognize this, and I can identify in this, and oh my gosh, I've never had this before. I've never been able to read it and feel something in my heart. And some days I'm like, I'm done. I'm gonna quit forever. I'm not gonna talk to any of these people again because I'm just frustrated because of this, or I read something I didn't agree with, or somebody who I trust and care about did something in the name of God that was incredibly distasteful to me. That's a day-to-day problem, and that's a day-to-day situation. And so, am I fixed? No, I'm not. I'm still broken. I'm still complicated, and I'm still imperfect. But ultimately, I have a light. I have a spark that I've never had before, and if that is all that it's ever going to be, I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I have the feeling and the ability to hopefully see what that can turn into. And I feel like that's incredible. And I feel like that's just a wonderful opportunity for me. So is it done? In no way. I think the journey's still very much ahead of me. Who's to say where it's going to go? But I'm glad to have a community that I can have the kindling around that spark, that if it ever was going to grow into a flame, this is the one place it would be.
Well, I love so much about Scotty's story because I love Scotty, but one of the lines that stood out to me was when Scotty said Hope City is not a place where people are believers, because the truth is, all of us are working through what we believe on some level. Like, none of us has it all figured out. Remember, Jesus has intended the church to be a community for those who don't know what we believe yet, who are still coming to believe. But instead, as Scotty said so well, Hope City is a place where believers are people. And so as a church, we create intentional environments for people to work through our stuff and come to experience Jesus. How? Well, we create intentional environments through another one of our values. We are all in the same boat, which means that we build relationships with the intent to foster transparency. You don't have to wear a mask or fake it, because none of us has arrived. None of us has it all together. We are all a work in progress. And so that means that anyone going through anything, anywhere, can come into this community and work through what we believe. It means that we're going to allow God the space to do what only He can do in people's lives. Like Scotty said, it's the environment where that spark can become a flame. And Jesus says that only God can reveal who Jesus is to people. We're not anyone's Holy Spirit. We're not anyone's moral authority. We're simply here to create environments that allow Jesus to do what only He can do in people's lives, to let that spark of faith become a flame. So you want to know who we are? Who is Hope City? Well, this is us. We are a community. We're a community of people made up of real, imperfect, still trying to figure out who we are and who Jesus is people. We're a community where that spark of faith can be fanned into a flame. We're built on the foundation of who Jesus is. He's the Son of the living God, our Savior. And that foundation is strong enough to hold every one of our questions, our doubts, our fears, our struggles, our sins. That foundation is strong enough to go right up against the gates of hell. And so we create intentional environments where we're all in the same boat, because we believe that Jesus has intended the church to be the community where people work through what they believe and where He reveals who He is to us. This is us. We're a community.
Come on, let's respond in worship today. We sing to the champion of heaven and earth. He has won every battle. He is with us. He is for us. He's worthy of our song today. So come on, let's sing together. I've tried so hard to see it. It took me so long to believe it, that you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve it. You take the broken things and you raise them to glory. And you are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won, and I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it. Oh yeah. declare this truth today. When I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority Jesus has given me. And when I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority, oh, that Jesus has given me. Oh, when I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the earth, oh yes I do, that Jesus has given me. And when I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority, that Jesus has given me. And you are my champion. And giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won, sing I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated. By the power of your name, I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all.
Well, thank you again for hanging with us today, and we hope you enjoyed Adam's talk. And Scotty, thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable with us today. And hopefully you guys can relate to a lot of what Scotty shared, because I know that I definitely can.
I
So,
appreciate it. And like I said, it was a pleasure not only to get to share it with you, but to share it with all of you. It's such a wonderful opportunity here to be free to kind of share, what I've been through and what I am going through each and all the time. So I appreciate you guys listening and being there with me throughout the whole process.
For sure. So again, if you want to connect with us, you can find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and we're again having a gathering October the 3rd at 10 o'clock. Come hang out, have some snacks, and we're looking forward to meeting you. Have a
Indeed.
great day.